In 1992, a Chinese farmer was draining what he thought was a small pond when he made a discovery that shouldn't exist. Beneath the water lay a perfectly carved underground cathedral, larger than most modern buildings, with walls so precisely cut they looked machine-made. The problem? No one had any record of building it. No tools were found, no debris, no historical documents. It was as if an advanced civilization had simply vanished, leaving behind impossible architecture that our modern world struggled to explain. But here's the truly unsettling part. This isn't an isolated incident. Across our planet, from Lebanon to Peru, from Turkey to Easter Island, archaeologists keep finding the same thing. Massive stone constructions that shouldn't exist. Built by people who supposedly couldn't build them, using techniques we can't replicate even today. Take Baalbek in Lebanon, where 3 foundation stones each weigh 800 tons. That's heavier than the largest object any modern crane can lift. Or consider the walls at Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where 200-ton granite blocks are fitted together so perfectly that you can't slide a razor blade between them. Modern engineers admit they have no idea how these feats were accomplished, even with today's technology. But here's where it gets really interesting. Nearly every culture on Earth, from the ancient Mesopotamians to the Hopi of North America, from Chinese legends to Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, tells the same tale. A great flood that wiped out an advanced civilization, leaving only scattered survivors and mysterious stone monuments behind. Modern science confirms that between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago, sea levels rose by over 400 feet as massive ice sheets melted, flooding vast coastal areas where advanced civilizations might have thrived. What if these megalithic sites aren't just random ancient achievements? What if they're the last surviving messages from a sophisticated global civilization that was swept away in a single world-changing catastrophe? Today, we're going to examine 8 of the most compelling sites on Earth. Places where the evidence points to knowledge and technology that shouldn't have existed, all built before the Great Flood that changed our world forever. Let's start with perhaps the most impossible construction project in human history. The massive stone blocks of Baalbek in Lebanon. When you first see the trilithon, 3 enormous limestone blocks that form the foundation of this ancient complex, your brain simply refuses to accept what your eyes are telling you. Each of these stones weighs approximately 800 tons. That's the equivalent of 400 automobiles stacked together, or roughly twice the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 747. To understand just how impossible this feat truly is, consider that the largest crane in the world today, the Typhoon crane in China, can lift a maximum of 400 tons under perfect conditions. The trilithon stones are twice that weight, and they were somehow quarried nearly a kilometer away, transported across uneven terrain, and then lifted and positioned with such precision that the joints between them are nearly invisible. No mortar was used. These massive blocks simply rest against each other, with tolerances measured in millimeters. But wait, it gets even more extraordinary. Still lying in the quarry is an even larger stone called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing an estimated 1,000 tons. This single block of carved limestone represents more stone than most ancient civilizations moved in their entire histories. Yet here it sits, shaped and ready for transport by people who supposedly had access to nothing more sophisticated than copper chisels and wooden levers. When the Romans arrived at Baalbek around 2,000 years ago, they found these massive foundation stones already in place and simply built their temples on top of them. Roman historian Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, marveled at these stones and admitted that no one knew who had placed them there or how it had been accomplished. The Romans, master engineers who built aqueducts and amphitheaters across their empire, looked at these stones and essentially said, "We have no idea how this was done." Local Lebanese folklore has preserved stories for thousands of years about giants who once lived in the valley. Beings of immense strength who could lift enormous stones as easily as a child stacks building blocks. While such tales might sound fantastical, They raise an unsettling question. If neither the Romans with their advanced engineering knowledge nor modern civilization with our powerful machinery can explain how these stones were moved, what does that tell us about the people who actually accomplished this feat? But if Baalbek challenges our understanding of ancient engineering capabilities, then the precision stonework at Sacsayhuaman in Peru completely shatters it. High in the Andes Mountains above the city of Cusco, this ancient fortress showcases a level of craftsmanship that borders on the supernatural. We're not just talking about big stones here, we're talking about stones weighing up to 200 tons that have been cut and fitted together with such precision that the joints between them are virtually invisible. Walk up to these walls and try to slide a piece of paper between the stones. You can't do it. These massive blocks, some with as many as 12 precisely cut angles, fit together like pieces of a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. But unlike a jigsaw puzzle, each piece weighs as much as a locomotive and had to be transported from distant quarries across some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. Modern experiments attempting to replicate this stonework using ancient tools have failed spectacularly. Even with contemporary equipment, creating stones that fit together with this level of precision would be extraordinarily difficult and time-consuming. Yet at Sacsayhuaman, we see walls stretching for hundreds of meters, all displaying the same impossible perfection. The local Quechua people have preserved legends about the Viracochas, mysterious teachers who came from across the sea and possessed knowledge far beyond that of ordinary humans. According to these traditions, the Viracochas taught the ancestors advanced techniques of agriculture, astronomy, and construction, before vanishing mysteriously after a great catastrophe described as a massive flood that reshaped the world. The stones of Sacsayhuaman, they say, were moved by these advanced beings using methods that have been lost to time. What makes these stories particularly intriguing is their consistency with flood myths found around the world, and with our next stop, a site that provides direct physical evidence of the great deluge that these legends describe. Off the coast of Syria, beneath the blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea, lies proof that the sea levels of our world have changed dramatically since ancient times. The ancient Phoenician city of Arwad, continuously inhabited for over 4,000 years, sits on a small island just off the Syrian coast. But surrounding this island, several meters beneath the surface of the Mediterranean, archaeologists have discovered megalithic walls constructed from massive limestone blocks. These underwater structures employ the same precise stonework we've seen in Peru and Lebanon, enormous blocks fitted together without mortar, displaying a level of craftsmanship that clearly required significant planning and engineering expertise. The crucial detail here is that these walls are underwater. They weren't built beneath the sea. They were constructed on dry land and later submerged as sea levels rose. This provides direct archaeological evidence that the Mediterranean coast looked very different when these structures were built, with much lower sea levels exposing land that is now permanently flooded. The implications are staggering. If advanced civilizations were building sophisticated megalithic structures in areas that are now underwater, how many other sites have been lost beneath the waves? How much of our ancient history lies hidden beneath hundreds of feet of water, destroyed by the same catastrophic sea level rise that ancient flood myths describe? This pattern of sophisticated construction followed by submersion brings us to one of Egypt's most enigmatic sites, hidden in plain sight behind one of the country's most famous temples. The Osirion, located behind the temple of Seti I at Abydos, presents archaeologists with a puzzle that challenges everything we think we know about ancient Egyptian construction techniques. Descending into the Osirion feels like entering a completely different world from the ornate, hieroglyph-covered temples that Egypt is famous for. Instead of colorful painted walls and intricate carvings, you find yourself surrounded by massive granite blocks, each weighing approximately 100 tons, arranged in a stark, minimalist design that seems almost modern in its simplicity. These enormous stones are fitted together without any mortar, using the same precision construction techniques we've observed at megalithic sites around the world. What makes the Osirion particularly fascinating is that it displays clear evidence of significant water damage. The structure is partially submerged in groundwater, and the stone surfaces show erosion patterns consistent with prolonged exposure to flowing water. Some researchers argue that these erosion patterns are similar to those found on the Great Sphinx at Giza, suggesting both monuments experienced periods of heavy rainfall or flooding that occurred thousands of years before Egypt's recorded dynastic periods. But perhaps most intriguingly, ancient Egyptian texts themselves suggest that the Egyptians didn't claim to have built the Osirion. Instead, they described inheriting sacred sites from an earlier civilization they called the Shemsu Hor, or followers of Horus, semi-divine beings who ruled Egypt in a golden age before recorded history began. The Egyptians, master builders in their own right, looked at structures like the Osirion and said, essentially, "We didn't build this, we inherited it from those who came before." If the Osirion suggests that ancient civilizations possessed construction techniques beyond what we expect from their era, then our next site challenges our understanding of what tools and technology were available to ancient peoples. In the desert of Saudi Arabia stands a geological formation so perfectly cut that it defies natural explanation, yet was created in an era when the most advanced tools were supposedly made of bronze and stone. Al-Naslaa consists of two enormous sandstone boulders separated by a vertical cut so precise it appears to have been made by a laser. The split runs straight down through several meters of solid rock, creating a gap that is uniform in width from top to bottom. The edges of this cut are perfectly smooth, showing none of the rough, irregular surfaces you would expect from natural geological processes or ancient hand tools. To appreciate just how extraordinary this precision is, consider that even today, cutting through a rock formation of this size would require industrial diamond-tipped saws or laser cutting equipment. The level of precision displayed at Al-Naslaa is simply not achievable using Bronze Age tools, regardless of how much time and effort were invested in the work. Local Bedouin traditions speak of ancient craftsmen who possessed mysterious tools and techniques that allowed them to shape stone as easily as clay. While such stories might sound mythical, they echo similar legends from around the world about lost technologies and forgotten methods of working with stone. When faced with evidence this compelling, we have to ask, what techniques were available to ancient peoples that we've forgotten or lost to history? But precision stonework is just one piece of the puzzle. Our next site demonstrates that ancient civilizations also possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge that rivals our modern understanding of celestial mechanics. In the rolling hills of Ireland's Boyne Valley stands Newgrange, a monument that predates both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid of Giza by centuries, yet displays a level of astronomical precision that wouldn't be matched again for thousands of years. Built around 3200 BC, Newgrange appears from the outside to be simply a large grass-covered mound. But this humble exterior conceals one of the most sophisticated astronomical instruments ever created. Once a year, on the winter solstice, a narrow beam of sunlight enters through a precisely positioned opening above the entrance called the roof box. This beam travels down a 60-foot passage and illuminates the inner chamber for exactly 17 minutes, creating a dramatic spectacle that has occurred without fail for over 5,000 years. The level of planning and mathematical calculation required to achieve this precision is staggering. The builders had to account for the Earth's axial tilt, the sun's position on the winter solstice, and the exact angle and dimensions of the passage to ensure that sunlight would penetrate to the chamber's heart on this specific day. This wasn't accomplished through trial and error. It required detailed astronomical knowledge and sophisticated engineering capabilities. What makes Newgrange even more intriguing are the intricate carvings that cover its stones. Spirals, circles, and geometric patterns that are virtually identical to symbols found at megalithic sites thousands of miles away. These same spiral motifs appear on stones in Peru, in China, and at sites across Europe and Asia. The consistency of these symbols across vast distances suggests either a shared cultural tradition or contact between ancient civilizations that were supposedly isolated from each other. Irish legends speak of the Tuatha De Danann, a mystical race that possessed extraordinary knowledge and built monuments that seemed to defy natural law. According to these traditions, the Tuatha De Danann vanished mysteriously after a great catastrophe involving floods and storms that reshaped the land. Once again, we encounter the same pattern: advanced knowledge, sophisticated construction, and stories of a civilization that disappeared after a global flooding event. This pattern becomes even more compelling when we examine what happened to civilizations that were thriving right up until the time when these global flood events supposedly occurred. On a remote island in the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from any other populated land, we find evidence of a sophisticated society that suddenly collapsed, leaving behind one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Easter Island, known locally as Rapa Nui, is home to nearly 900 massive stone statues called Moai that stare silently across the landscape with an intensity that is both magnificent and haunting. These statues, carved from volcanic tuff, average about 13 feet in height and weigh approximately 14 tons each. But the most impressive statue, El Gigante, was left unfinished in the quarry. Had it been completed, this colossus would have stood nearly 70 feet tall and weighed over 250 tons. The precision required to carve these statues from volcanic rock using primitive tools is extraordinary, but even more puzzling is how they were transported across the island from the quarry to their final positions. Many Moai stand several miles from where they were carved, positioned on massive stone platforms called ahu along the coastline. Moving statues this large across difficult terrain would challenge modern equipment, yet somehow the Rapa Nui people accomplished this feat hundreds of times. Local oral traditions describe the statues as having walked across the island through spiritual power, a story that might sound purely mythical until you realize that recent experiments have shown it's actually possible to move these statues upright by rocking them back and forth with ropes, creating a walking motion. This technique would have required detailed knowledge of physics and engineering principles that we don't typically associate with isolated Pacific Island cultures. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Archaeological evidence shows that Easter Island once supported a thriving civilization of 10,000 to 15,000 people who maintained sophisticated agricultural systems and organized the massive labor projects necessary to carve and move the Moai. Then, sometime around the 17th or 18th century, something catastrophic happened. The population crashed to just a few hundred people. Statue construction abruptly ceased, and numerous unfinished Moai were abandoned in the quarry, as if their creators had simply vanished overnight. What caused this sudden collapse? While some researchers point to environmental factors like deforestation and resource depletion, geological studies have revealed evidence of extreme climatic events during this period, including droughts, storms, and possibly tsunamis triggered by distant seismic activity. Rapa Nui oral traditions preserve vivid memories of great waves that destroyed coastal villages, describing catastrophic events that match the pattern of global flood myths found in cultures around the world. The abandonment of Easter Island's statue projects leads us to ask a crucial question. If civilizations capable of such sophisticated achievements could vanish so suddenly and completely, what does that tell us about other advanced societies that might have existed before recorded history began? Our final site provides compelling evidence that human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than mainstream archaeology has traditionally acknowledged. Hidden beneath the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey lies what may be the most important archaeological discovery of the modern era. Göbekli Tepe, meaning Potbelly Hill in Turkish, has fundamentally changed our understanding of when and how human civilization began. Built nearly 12,000 years ago, this massive temple complex predates Stonehenge by 7,000 years and the Great Pyramid by over 6,000 years, making it the oldest known monumental architecture on Earth. What makes Göbekli Tepe so revolutionary is not just its age, but its sophistication. The site consists of multiple circular enclosures built from enormous T-shaped limestone pillars, some reaching nearly 20 feet in height and weighing up to 20 tons each. These pillars are covered with intricate carvings of animals, lions, foxes, serpents, vultures, and scorpions, executed with artistic skill that far exceeds what archaeologists previously believed possible for this time period. But perhaps most intriguingly, Göbekli Tepe features symbols that appear at ancient sites around the world. One pillar depicts a humanoid figure carrying a small bag or purse, an enigmatic symbol that appears in carvings from ancient Mesopotamia to the stone monuments of Central America. The recurring appearance of this handbag motif across different continents and time periods suggests either remarkable coincidence or evidence of contact between ancient civilizations that mainstream archaeology insists were completely isolated from each other. The construction of Göbekli Tepe required not just massive labor efforts, but sophisticated planning and engineering knowledge. Moving and positioning stones of this size would have demanded complex organizational skills and cooperation among large groups of people, capabilities that supposedly didn't exist among hunter-gatherer societies of this era. Yet there's no evidence that Göbekli Tepe served as a settlement or dwelling place. Instead, it appears to have been a ceremonial center, possibly the world's oldest temple, where people from various regions gathered for rituals and celebrations. What makes this discovery even more mysterious is that around 8000 BC, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried under tons of earth and rubble. This wasn't natural abandonment. It was an intentional act that preserved the site remarkably well until its rediscovery in the 1990s. Why would people who had invested enormous effort in creating this monumental complex suddenly decide to bury it completely? Recent discoveries in the same region have revealed that Göbekli Tepe wasn't unique. Sites like Karahan Tepe and Nevali Chori feature similar T-shaped pillars and circular enclosures, suggesting that this area of Turkey was home to a sophisticated cultural network that shared common religious practices and architectural knowledge. The consistency of symbols and construction techniques across these sites indicates a level of cultural organization and communication that challenges our understanding of prehistoric societies. As we've journeyed across the globe, examining these 8 remarkable sites, a pattern has emerged that's impossible to ignore. From Lebanon to Peru, from Syria to Turkey, we find evidence of sophisticated construction techniques, precise astronomical knowledge, and symbolic traditions that appear far too advanced for their supposed time periods. These aren't isolated anomalies. They represent a consistent pattern of evidence pointing toward a lost chapter in human history. The timeline is particularly compelling. All of these sites were constructed before 3000 BC, with many dating back much further. This places their creation during or before the period when modern science tells us that massive ice sheets were melting and sea levels were rising by hundreds of feet across the globe. The archaeological evidence of underwater structures, the geological evidence of rapid sea level change, and the mythological evidence of global flood traditions all point toward the same conclusion. Something catastrophic happened to human civilization between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago. The scientific evidence for this catastrophic period is overwhelming. The Younger Dryas period, ending around 11,700 years ago, saw rapid climate change and massive flooding as ice sheets collapsed. Sea levels rose by over 400 feet, flooding vast coastal areas where advanced civilizations might have thrived. If sophisticated societies existed in these now submerged regions, their destruction would explain both the survival of scattered megalithic sites on higher ground and the preservation of flood myths in cultures around the world. Consider the implications. If a global civilization existed before the Great Flood, possessing advanced knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and construction techniques, its survivors would have carried fragments of this knowledge to scattered locations around the world. They would have built monuments designed to preserve their achievements and pass their wisdom to future generations. These megalithic sites wouldn't just be impressive ancient buildings, they would be messages from a lost civilization, encoded in stone and designed to survive the ages. The evidence suggests that human history is far more complex and interconnected than we've traditionally believed. The sophisticated knowledge displayed at these ancient sites, the consistency of symbols and techniques across vast distances, and the global pattern of flood myths all point toward a forgotten chapter in our past. Whether we call it Atlantis, a lost civilization, or simply acknowledge that human achievement began much earlier than we thought, the evidence demands that we reconsider everything we think we know about ancient history. What other secrets lie buried beneath our oceans, hidden under centuries of sediment or waiting to be discovered in remote corners of our world? The megalithic monuments we've explored today may be just the beginning of a much larger story, one that reveals human civilization to be far older, more advanced, and more globally connected than we ever imagined. The Great Flood may have reset human civilization, but it couldn't erase the evidence entirely. In stone monuments scattered across our planet, the achievements of our forgotten ancestors continue to challenge us to remember what we've lost and to question what we think we know about our own past.